Welcome to another episode of the Loadout Music Podcast, featuring in-depth interviews with a wide range of music personalities, from rock and roll Hall of Famers to Grammy winners and today's rising stars. Recorded from the Old Rock House in St. Louis, Missouri, here's your host, Aaron Perlott.
Welcome back to the Loadout Music Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Aaron Perlott, and today I am joined by Red Dirt music legend, Cody Canada. Cody, thank you so much for being on the show.
You got it. Thank you for having me, Aaron.
So you've kind of had a long and winding career through music. I guess starting back in '94 when you first started Cross Canadian Ragweed. But I knew you were originally born in Texas. What was your gateway into music? How did you first get into it?
I got into it. I went to see George Strait in concert. Yeah. My dad, who's 76 and still doing the oil field game. Back then, he was the president of a place called Armco, and they were just handing out tickets to stuff. And it was 1980, and he got tickets to see George Strait in about a 300 capacity sit-down restaurant kind of. Like long ways away from what George does now. And back then you could take kids to places that served alcohol, and I think it was called liquor by the drink back in the 80s in Oklahoma. So we got to go see George, and I loved music. I listened to music. My sisters played really good old rock and roll. I mean, it wasn't old back then, it was new, but the Who and Skinner and Van Halen and all that, but I wasn't really interested in it yet. So I really hit the ground running with the George Strait thing. Went home, and my mom had a guitar that she never played, and of course she gave me the old, well, I was going to sell that thing, but if you'll play it, like, she wasn't going to sell it. She didn't even know it was in the closet, and so I learned a little bit on it. And after that, I started learning chords and just playing along with stuff. And then rock and roll hit me, about 10 years old. And then about 13, my folks split. And at the same time was the Seattle movement. And I felt like it was custom made for my anger. And I went from there, and really, I was all about the songwriting of the old country guys and all about the rock and roll instruments of the Seattle movement. So, I really kind of just accidentally forged them together, I guess. Yeah.
Which really is, whether you call it alt country or red dirt or country rock, that is really that exactly what you're talking about. It's that meeting point of kind of rock and roll and country, whether it's like Tom Petty and Steve Earle, or going as far back as the Byrds and what Chris Hillman ultimately became when he left the Byrds, right?
Yeah, and that was the stuff that I discovered soon after I left Yukon, Oklahoma, is where I grew up. When I moved up to Stillwater, Oklahoma, that's where I started meeting all my friends in the music business. But that's where I learned of Graham Parsons and Chris Hillman. When I was a kid, Chris Hillman was in a band called the Desert Rose Band.
Band, yeah.
I thought he was a brand new artist, and I didn't know that until I got to Stillwater, and Jason Boland told me, this guy started a long time before that. And then I realized that a lot of these Graham Parsons songs that I didn't know who Graham Parsons were. I was listening to Dwight, and Dwight was playing all that California stuff, and man, it was just a good learning experience for me to learn all that stuff with my peers.
Yeah, and we've had Chris on the show before. I know he's an absolute hero of mine. He's done from the Byrds to the Burritos to what he did with Richie Furay and as you mentioned, Desert Rose Band, where he was one of those guys kind of helping to keep country together in the 80s when there weren't a lot of great country performers in the 80s. It wasn't a great decade for country music. The 90s are a completely different story, because that's when kind of Garth Brooks and a number of other performers like Alan Jackson just kind of reinvented country music all of a sudden.
And that's where I was from. I was from Yukon, where Garth was from. He went to school with my sister, and they graduated the same year and didn't really know each other. My sister's a stoner, that listened to rock, and Garth was, a cowboy ag kid that listened to rock. But when I was leaving Yukon, that was what everybody was like. Well, you're going to do this. You want to be Garth Brooks. And it's like, no, I don't. I respect everything that he did, but that just really wasn't my bag. I wanted more of the folky stuff, and more of the edgier songwriter stuff. Steve Earle spun me on my head when I was a kid. When I heard that, I was like, this is what I want to do. This is the kind of stuff I felt like I meant to do, and still doing it 30 years later.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I find it pretty remarkable that, especially if you're talking, there's so many people who just shock me and don't know who Steve Earle is, or I know, you have a relationship with Wylie Hubbard and he's kind of my songwriting hero, but guys like that who were so foundational in kind of the alt country or red dirt space today, because they've become that perfect blend of kind of rock and roll and country, lyrically leaning a little more country, but musically leaning a little more rock and roll. But there's so many people who are unaware of just the immensely talented people like a Steve Earle or like a Wylie Hubbard. Although within the songwriting community, songwriters know who those guys are in a heartbeat.
Yeah, this is going to make me sound like an old guy down here now, but I felt like when we started doing this 25 years ago, almost 30 years ago, in our scene, if you will, in the Okie, Texas scene, everybody knew Steve Earle.
Yeah.
But now, now you have people that are 20 years old, that are giving people like us or Jason Boland credit for doing the role that Steve Earle did for us, back in the day. And then we get to say, hey, have you ever heard of this guy? Well, I've heard of Copperhead Road. That's the song that everybody line dances.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, no.
There's so much more.
Yeah, let's forget about that for a minute. We'll get back to it.
Yeah. And then there's bands like, I think Uncle Tupelo is really kind of a forerunner of that kind of blend, that hybrid of country and rock. And obviously those guys split up after a bit, became Sunvold and Wilco. And Jeff's done really, really well with Wilco. But another band that I think sometimes doesn't get its due is a band like Uncle Tupelo for the role they played in, the mid 80s and kind of keeping that alive. Yeah,
that was another band that I don't think I would have probably heard about them for 20 years if I hadn't gone to Stillwater. And all of us were learning, because Mike McClure, from the Great Divide, he was our producer for years, still is. He knew so much more than the rest of us, or he pretended that he did. And he taught us who Uncle Tupelo was, and that led us to Whiskey Town, and all that led us to the people that we know now, like Reckless Kelly and Mickey and the boys. And it's really awesome how it's all a common thread.
Yeah, and it is, and it's I think the radio has kind of to a degree done a disservice to the music industry, in that it's become so I don't know, just so separated, in that there's so much good music out there, particularly in the red dirt and alt country space, that it's really hard to find it unless you know exactly what you're looking for. And so there's this kind of sense of discovery. Yeah, that's true. I always bitched for years, and it was also fun to do it from the stage, because, you get people riled up, talking about how Nashville's not what it's supposed to be. And then they would start saying Nashville sucks and all that, and in the end, it didn't really. It was just some of the music coming out. But that was our war cry, for listen to alternative country music, and now, I sometimes I feel like a traitor towards my friends that are still in radio, but without satellite radio, I don't think there would be a lot of people that knew who a lot of these bands are, how a lot of us are. I had a guy back in 2020 that heard my band on Outlaw Country and didn't know who I was,
And then he did some research and found that I was the lead singer of Ragweed, and then that opened his door to so much more stuff, and then that led to us covering versions of Reckless Kelly and Wylie Hubbard songs. And then, I still keep in touch with this guy through the internet, and I think with the switch to satellite, it did a lot of us a good service.
Oh yeah, I mean, the first time that I ever heard a cross Canadian Ragweed song was, you hear this song's by Wylie Hubbard, which I think is a law in the Midwest and Texas, that if you're going to cover one of Ray's songs, that you have to actually say that as you're right before you perform it.
Yeah. Obviously, we got that from Gary P. Nunn saying that on the Luckenbach record. And I had said it in the studio, just kind of kidding around, trying to keep back in the Ragweed days. There were days in the studio that were really good, and there were days that were volatile, and that was one of those volatile days. And I said that just to put a smile on everybody's face. And Mike's like, we got to keep that, dude. Yeah. Well, I'm glad we did, because now, I say that before the show sometimes, or before the song sometimes, and the crowd says it back, and it's a good thing to have, to keep everybody smiling.
Yeah. So I guess it was about like the 94 where you guys put together Cross Canadian Ragweed, and it's you and Matt and Grady Cross and Randy Ragsdale, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Now, how did you four come together initially? Or I guess
see, my original lineup was going to be Ragsdale and Jeremy Plato, who Jeremy joined Ragweed a year into Ragweed. So he joined in 95, but Ragsdale's best buddy was Wiedemann. And so they wanted to, it was just the three of us. And then Grady and I had been running around a bit, and he wanted to play guitar. And, and not looking for the sympathy card, but it's not like I had a lot of pals back in high school. I didn't have a lot of friends, I mean, I had my guitar and just like two buddies, and he was one of them. So I told him to get better at guitar, and let's dive into this. And I honestly knew, and I've said this before, it's not like breaking news, but I'd said before that Wiedemann wasn't really up to par. We were 17 years old. I was the middle kid in the band, and Ragsdale was 16, and so was Wiedemann. But he wasn't great, but they all promised to get better. And then within a year, Wiedemann grew tired of it, and it sounds selfish, but I got my way. I got Plato. I knew Plato was going to be the one that would challenge us to be a better band. And so Ragsdale, in the beginning, he showed up to my house with his drums in the back of his truck, and I just got off work. I was hauling hay and coal, and I was ready to go have a beer. I was underage and all that, but I was ready to go find my friends and hit a back road. And he said, well, I packed this drum kit up. It's like, well, man, I'm tired, and I don't really want to play anything. I just want to go have a few beers. And so he went with me, and I ended up staying at his house. And the next day we got up and just kind of started banging around together. And it was me and him and his dad. And then Wiedemann came over, and then we practiced for about 3 weeks. And then we realized, man, if we do this about 7 days a week, then we can get us a gig at what was called the Czech parade, or the Czech day, Czechoslovakian day, there in Yukon, Oklahoma. It's Czech town. And it was a deal where in the alley of the 50-yard line bar, my dad parked a trailer. We set up on it, and the deal was my dad would loan us the trailer if he got to drink free all day. And we sat out there and played the same 12 songs for probably 6 hours. But nobody cared. It was just, there wasn't a band in Yukon. I mean, there was these guys named Pearl, they were probably 40 years old then, and that was old, and they were playing downtown Oklahoma City. So we were really the only band in town And as long as they were paying us and as long as we were having fun, you know, we just kept playing the same 12 songs over and over. And then it got to the point where we even got tired of it, and Jeremy stepped in, and that's when I told the guys, like, man, now, with no disrespect to Matt, we have a band, and he's the better musician, so we all have to step up. And we did, and started getting busier and busier. And then I left and went to Stillwater and started playing acoustic up there, where I met Jason Boland and Stoney Larue. And so then the song catalog started coming together.
Was that really kind of a key, beyond Matt leaving the band? Was that really a key turning point for you kind of going out and really kind of honing the songs that ultimately would kind of comprise the catalog and make up what people would start ultimately recognizing you from?
Yeah, I mean, all those years in Stillwater where I was playing Tuesday nights by myself, and then eventually Tuesday nights turned into me and Boland, and then that turned into Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday acoustic, and then Friday and Saturday was the band. So the weekday gigs were, I was learning how to talk to a crowd and how not to talk to a crowd, and how to really write songs that made people kind of forget what they were going through, you know, whether it was a good or bad thing, you know. And so I always felt like the acoustic shows were really my internship into the music business. And because I wasn't getting paid a whole lot, but I felt like I learned more than anybody else was at the time. And once we got all the songs stacked up, then we started recording there in Stillwater, and they were good recordings. They were fun, but we knew at the time that we were recording in a friend's house, and the next step was to move on up, you know, and find a real studio. But first thing we had to do was save money, which we were not very good at.
Good at spending it, just not good at saving it.
We were spending it. Yeah, we were. When my wife took over, we had $18 in a lockbox. But we were splitting it 5 ways, you know, four band members. And the fifth was, you know, the lockbox, and the rest we were just spending on beer and weed, you know. And this really no concept of money or saving money or stuff like that, you know. And it's not like any of us had a dad or a mom that were taking care of us. We were really doing it all on our own. And then I knew that we needed help, and I knew that she was smarter than us at this business thing. So she took over, and that's when it really started flourishing, you know.
Yeah, you know, you mentioned I don't know, tension's not the word, but you mentioned eventually, you know, you got to a point where there was some tension within the band, and you ultimately broke up. I think it was around 2010 is when you kind of went out on your own with The Departed. What was the and I mean, you know, a band is like any other organization. There's always chemistry issues. And what was it that ultimately kind of, at least at that juncture, drove you guys apart?
I ultimately put it towards we were overworked.
Yeah.
I mean, that had a lot to do with it, but there were mounting tensions, you know. My wife was really good at saving money. My wife's really good at investing, and you know, at one point we were making, at 1 year we made almost $3 million, our busiest year, right here, B. And well, the other guy, two of the guys in the band were like, well, where's our money? And it's like, well, we have a $17,000 a month bus to pay for. You know, there's 4 members in the band, and there's 5 or 6 crew members, and you know, and there's this all kinds of stuff that we have to pay for, and they thought that it wasn't being managed right. And also 2 of those dudes wanted to go out and be country stars, and that was, I mean, that was sleeping with the enemy in my mind. I didn't want to do that. That was the exact opposite of what I wanted to do. So really it just came down to one of the members getting pissed off. He was drinking in the morning. He got mad and said, I don't like the way this is working. I was like, well, I mean, it's working though. And he said, well, if I can't have it, nobody will. And I'm breaking the band up. So I told him, I don't really know if you understand, because you've been drinking, what you're saying, because we're just now in our stride. And he didn't care. So pretty effective, immediately effective. It was, we had about 80 shows on the books, and we whittled it down to about 25 that wouldn't sue us if we canceled. And so we did about 25 shows as Ragweed. It was very tense and it sucked. It was not fun, because it was a band of brothers that were disbanding. And but the good news is I have a friend named Bruce Robison that stepped in, and him and I went out and covered those other shows acoustic, and we sold out Billy Bob's Texas, like 6,000 people acoustic, which they told me, I don't know if it's true or not, but they told me at the time that we were the first band to do that, first acoustic act to sell out acoustic. So it all worked out, everything was working in my favor. There was nothing I could do to keep that band from breaking up. It was just, a lot of it was, I at this point, I don't even care, but it's been I'm so far removed from it, but it was Grady wanting to do what he wanted to do. And it was go out and be the 30-minute opener before Miranda Lambert, and Miranda was opening for somebody else. It's like, there's no point in us being a ticket tearing band when we can sell out 6,000 capacity rooms and amphitheaters. And there's no reason for us to go out with Miranda. I love Miranda to death, but it just didn't make sense to me. And I didn't want to be a country guy. And he was like, well, I don't like it this way. And and everybody's going to suffer for it. So Jeremy and I still have our gig and we're still together, but those other guys, they don't do anything anymore. And I know they're probably regretful of it, but I get it all the time about, would you ever? And it's like, no, I wouldn't. The first step would be to be friends again.
Yeah.
And then the next step would be play music again. But, honestly, as a 3-piece, we sound just as full as we did back then. Grady, it's not like he was really adding to the pie. There was some rhythm there, but it wasn't nothing that we're not doing right now. We're playing the same songs that we played back then, and they sound the same.
Yeah.
They sound a little tighter. I think that comes with age. We're a little more mature than we were. We're not throwing down a bottle of Jägermeister a night. Now we're just like a couple of shots to ease the nerves and let's put on a show. That's our main concern now, is put on a show and not the party, because we're not 20 years old anymore.
But you did in, I guess it was about a year ago, you kind of rebooted Soul Gravy, re-release. Now, was that really just you, or did you have to get the guys together to have a joint agreement to do that? How did that work?
All those songs are mine. I wrote or co-wrote 99% of the songs, except for the covers, like Ray Wylie stuff,
Yeah.
The Ray Wylie song was the only one on the record that I didn't write. That's the one thing that I never did. Never sell you. They always tell you, as shiny as it looks, don't sell your publishing. And I didn't. I never will. I held on to the songs, and back in the day, the Ragweed, other two in Ragweed wanted a piece of that, and they wanted to buy into that. And I was like, man, I wrote the songs, and and if they're mine, and that's not me being selfish. That's just me protecting my brand and protecting my future and my family.
Yeah.
And so no, it wasn't nothing. I noticed that Taylor Swift put out her thing, because it was the same record label, Universal, and they did that thing to her where she didn't really own the rights to those songs. And then when she went around and said, well, they're my songs, you just don't own those recordings. And I waited it out. I'm not a very patient person, but I waited it out, and they didn't come after her. And I thought, if they don't come after her, they're not coming after me. Yeah. So I just hopped in. We have a studio here in we actually just pulled up to, we have a studio here in New Braunfels, Texas. And man, I just we just dove in during 2020 when nobody was doing anything, and started doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I got to do it the way I wanted to. I got to bring in Ray Wylie to sing and Randy Rogers to sing, and Leanne revised her role as Sick and Tired. And then I got my kids, my boys. Dirks is 17 and Willie's 15, and Willie's a drummer, and Dirks is a guitar player, and they played on the record. And I got some of Cole Wetzel's guys, and just really kind of sharing the wealth, which is really what I wanted to do. You know, I always make the joke that I'm old enough now I can start re-recording my music.
Yeah. Well, then, and you also did, I'll tell you, a song that I love that you do was, you know, you mentioned your friend Jason Boland before, but the 2009 tribute to Robert Earle Keen that you played a role in. You actually have two songs on that record. You have Shades of Grey with Jason, and then you also did Undone with Chris Knight.
Mm-hmm.
That must have been just because, you know, Robert Earle Keen is he's just such a prolific songwriter. I know he's kind of stepping back now and retiring essentially, but I mean, that must have been fun to, one, be able to do that with Jason, but two, also be able to play on something that was a tribute to such, you know, a songwriter, such a influential guy, especially in that, you know, in the Red Dirt community.
Robert has always been, I found out about Robert when I went to Stillwater, and that was also a Mike McClure connection. I mean, we always make the joke in this scene that all roads lead to McClure, because they do. You know, McClure was so happy to have other people that were playing music that he was playing and interested in. You know, he was like, well, you guys got to check this out. You know, he turned me on to Todd Snyder, and I'd never heard of Todd. I mean, I actually saw Todd Snyder on Conan O'Brien in '94, and I thought, who's this weird guy? This sounds strange. And he's up there dancing doing a chicken dance, you know, and
doing his best Iggy Pop.
Yes, he was, and then he still looks like he's Iggy Pop.
He does look like Iggy Pop. Doesn't sound like him, but he sure looks like him.
So McClure introduced me to Robert, and then, man, I instantly fell in love and just started trying to write like Robert. And then once my wife and I got married, you know, we really started chasing the Robert Earle train, you know, and just paying attention to how he did things and how he booked shows and how he advertised and who he associated himself with when he played shows, you know. And that's, we set our business model after Robert, and to get to be able to do that tribute was just, I mean, and for it to be released. I mean, even if it wasn't released, I had the opportunity to do it. And I called him and said, every time there's a tribute to somebody, I have to ask them, first of all, is it cool if I do it? And second of all, what song should I do? And Robert said, Shades of Grey is about Oklahoma City. It's like, I actually knew that because I was supposed to go to a Robert Earle Keen concert that night. And then that bomb went off and nobody did anything. You know, Robert was playing downtown Oklahoma City that night, and he still played, but I didn't go. You know, this is before a cell phone. I think I had a pager, you know, but I didn't go. I just assumed that downtown was shut down because there was such a war scene, you know. And he said, so you were close. It's like, man, I was 4 miles from the Oklahoma City bombing, you know, and you were about 4 miles the opposite direction. And he said, well, I really feel like that's the tune that you need to do. And I said, I'm going to change it up a bit. You know, I don't want to do it the same. So I just slowed it down and drop D'd it and just made it kind of more drogey, you know, and he liked it. I played it for him first before I played it on the record for the tribute, and he gave me the approval. And to be honest with you, my career could have ended that day just because I got his blessing, you know.
Yeah. That's kind of how I felt when I first met with Ray Wylie. That all right, maybe I'll just quit talking about music, quit playing music. I'm good now. I spent some time with Ray. I'm all right now. I got everything I need.
He's a good dude. He's done a lot for me too.
Ray is he's a wonderful human being, and he's very generous with his time, especially for singer-songwriters. So it's kind of hard to not love a guy like that. So before you go, I do, you know, I feel like we've kind of left out the last 10 years of your career. which I know have been filled with a hell of a lot of playing out. You've done things like, you did a 2-disc record in 2019, the Some Old, Some New, maybe a cover or two. Your work, you did a 35 track record with McClure, who you mentioned before. Some of this has been with Departed, some of this has been just yourself. So just talk a little bit about the last 10 years of your career and kind of coming out of Cross Canadian, what you've tried to do and where you kind of see yourself going next.
I coming out of Ragweed, I didn't really know what to do, but it's because I'd been there for 16 years. I'd been there since I was 17 years old. And so many things happened within those 16 years. We started a band. We turned 18. We turned 21. We got married. We started having kids.
Kids named after singers. Kids only named after.
Right. and then all of a sudden we didn't have any of that. Yeah. All of a sudden it was, I'm still talking to you. I'm just moving real quick. We didn't have any of that. So I didn't really know what to do. And then I had told my new bandmates, that I really wanted to stay away from the Ragweed tunes for a minute. I just needed a break.
Yeah.
Well, that didn't work out for me because all people wanted was Ragweed stuff. And I was pretty pissed off. I was mad. And like I said, I'm so far removed from it now, it doesn't even matter. But there was one person that brought down the boat. And I didn't want to do those songs because it reminded me of it. Man, my heart was broke. So I just started writing new songs, and people liked them, but people also wanted to hear the old stuff, but I wasn't quite ready. It was like going back. It was like dating again. And so I didn't do them for, I don't know, a year. And that 1 year really hurt my career. People were mad that I wouldn't do the old songs. People stopped coming out. People would heckle me. And the more they would do that, the drunker I would get. And I just started giving it back to them. And then I got a reputation for about a year being an asshole. And I'm not that. I just needed some therapy, man. I needed some time away. And then I started doing the songs again. I went out to California with Jason Boland in 2012. And I got a song about San Francisco and a girl. And I was in San Francisco, and this lady in the crowd said, "It's not the band that we miss, it's your songs." And that really hit me hard. And I thought, what an idiot I've been. So I got home and I told the band that I needed to start doing these songs again. And the piano player and the drummer said, "No, we're not doing that." And I'm a very passive person, easily taken advantage of at certain points in my life, not anymore. And I had said, "Well, we have to." And they said, "We're not going to do that." And I said, "Well, then you guys can leave. But I have to start doing my songs again, because it's not fair to the people that have put us here, and it's not fair to me. I worked my ass off to get where I'm at." And those dudes left, and then Mike McClure's drummer joined me, and it eventually became a 3-piece rock and roll band trio. And man, it should have been this way from the beginning, although everybody told me that in the beginning, that you need to do a 3-piece trio and just play your songs, because I'm doing the rhythm and the lead, so it's not like we need a whole lot. It's just really the delivery. And
yeah,
I should have done that from the get-go.
Which I don't know if people understand how difficult it is to do both the rhythm and the leads. I mean, for someone who's been playing 30 years, maybe not, but I mean, I think for especially starting musicians, it's a very difficult thing. I mean, just simply the leads alone take real artistry. I mean, if
Well, for what? Go ahead, buddy. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, rhythm can be easier, but I mean, it's difficult. But I mean, it's just impressive that you're able to do that.
Well, and then, I mean, I don't want it to sound like I'm just bagging on an ex-member of Ragweed, but I had to do that. I had to learn rhythm and lead because that side of the stage wasn't strong enough yet, or strong enough. And so I had to do that. And then really what it is trying to figure out where to put the lead. It's really about what not to play, to be honest with you.
Sure.
Because you can overdo it in a heartbeat. And I've done that several nights of my life, overdone it. But that was it. It was just easier. It was more natural. Now we have people that come and go on guitar. My son Dirks plays sometimes on songs. My merch guy who's in my boys band for a bit, he plays with us. And then we have another guy that sits in. And those are fun nights when it's a 4-piece, but I'll probably never have a piano player again. Just because I had bad luck with them. I didn't have one there wasn't something, that disrupted the flow of the band. Nothing against their people. It's just that it just didn't work. I don't know. I wanted a piano player for so long, for so bad. Then it happened. I was like, well, this is really not what I wanted, what I thought was going to happen. But being a 3-piece really feels like where it's at, and it's easier, and with the Ragweed during the records, when we were the recording process, it was a 3-piece. It was me doing rhythm and the leads. So there really wasn't that big a difference when we just turned it into a 3-piece. I mean, it's the exact same process that we had back in the day. And it's easy. You just got to learn not to overplay or underplay.
Yeah. So what's next, man? What's like on the horizon for you that you're kind of, getting ready for or looking at over the next year?
Right now, I'm so comfortable with the way we're doing it right now. We have a studio. Brian Kinsey, who's driving over here. Brian's been my sound guy, tour manager, all of it for 20 years. And in 2020, we built the studio, and he heads that thing up. And we got another guy coming in later this year to start taking over some of that stuff. So really recording when we can. I bet we have a record full of stuff right now that we could release. It's not all my stuff. It's some covers. I was always afraid of doing too many covers. And then BJ Barham put out his 2 records, and I thought, man, this is no different than Willie Nelson. I mean, we all idolize Willie and we want to be Willie. Let's just keep record other people's stuff and then put your other stuff in there, your stuff. So really just recording as much as we can and playing. We're about 100 shows a year, which is still a lot to some people, but just about right to us. I sprinkle in some acoustic shows. Really just enjoying my kids as long as I got them at the house. They're 17 and 15, so that's not going to last forever, And my wife has a School of Rock franchise, so we've gone to other countries with that, and we just got back from Summerfest up in Milwaukee, and we are busy. I will tell you that we're busy, but with business being the way that it is, I didn't really appreciate the fact that records went away. But I had a guy in LA tell me, one of the Turnpike Troubadour management said, if you're selling 6 million records, then put a record out. But if you're not even selling under 100,000, on release week, then just put out singles, because you're gonna do 12 songs on a record and they're gonna hear 2, and the rest are gonna be lost. And that wasn't the only person I heard that from. So, we go in and record a tune, and then we get it polished up, and as soon as one single's done, we ship it to radio. And I really like it. I didn't think that I was going to like it as much as I do, but it makes it easier to focus on that one song, instead of, when you do a whole record, there's always a stepchild that doesn't get the attention that it should. And I feel like going song to song, you can put every bit of your attention into that single, So just doing that, just touring and raising kids and releasing songs every now and then. Right now, the Soul Gravy reboot's doing really good, and we got a couple of tunes loaded, singles. So when Soul Gravy runs out of steam, we're going to release those and probably package them up somehow. Hell, I don't know. We might do a small EP vinyl or something. I got to have that package. You know what I mean? I got to have the artwork means so much to me. And I feel like you got to have something with art on it to release and say, here's a physical copy of what I just did.
Yeah. Cody Canada, it's been a real treat and pleasure having you on the Loadout. Appreciate your time so much, especially doing it shotgun while driving.
Well, Brian's driving. I'm just riding shotgun. But I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you so much, Cody.
All right. Have a good day, buddy.